What is going on, everybody? RLTK podcast. Chilling here with my boy Chris. What is good, Chris?
Bro, what's up, man? How you
Hey,
doing?
I'm chilling, bro. You?
Man, I'm
You
good,
ready?
bro. Oh yeah, man. Woke up, got me some good coffee. Um, it's sad again. I ain't had my chicken yet. You know how I am about my chicken, man.
Stop it, bro.
I gotta have it.
Stop it.
It's a must in my life.
Hey,
I blame my tea lady. You know what I'm saying?
hey, shout out to the tea lady. You know what
Shout
I'm
out to the
saying? For
mama,
cooking that
man.
good food and back in the day, you
Facts,
know what I'm saying?
facts, big bro.
Hey,
Facts.
bro,
I
you can't
miss it,
you can't you can't beat mom's cooking, bro. I don't care what
bro.
anybody says. Hey,
Facts.
don't tell my wife I said this, but you cannot beat
Yeah.
your wife's cook. I mean, your mom's cooking, bro.
No,
Like it
you
just
can't,
is what it
bro.
is. Like
It's
it's
something
just
different.
yeah, bro. It
It
just
hits
and then
different, dude.
you smell it, and then it's
Yeah,
like it be taking you back memories and stuff, bro. Like oh
man,
shoot, I'm in my
facts.
backyard playing. I'm 7 years
Yep,
old because you smelt that
yep,
chicken. You know what I'm saying? I
facts.
know exactly what you're
Oh
talking about,
God,
bro.
facts, bro.
But hey, what we getting into today, bro?
I think today I want to talk about culture, man.
Okay, all right,
Yeah, man.
let's do it.
I want to get into culture, man. I think it falls in line with the last podcast we have in the sense of mental
Okay,
health, right? I think it
I feel
ties
you.
into this conversation. So, what is affecting our mental health? I think it's our culture. And so
Hmm.
I wanted to discuss what does the
All right,
culture look like
hold
today?
on, bro. Hold on, bro. You
Yeah.
can't say something like that and then not explain
Okay.
yourself.
All right.
You
All
cannot
right.
say something like that and not explain yourself. So please, what do you mean by our culture is affecting our mental health?
So as we talked about mental health and the different stages of it, and even when I opened up a little bit about what I struggle with my OCD, I was thinking about, what is our culture looking like today, and uh, what is the fundamental, what is the foundation of this culture? And I think it's two things. I think it's one, an existential ideal in a sense of you can create your own meaning.
Mm,
And two, it's this idea of empiricism. I think it's a form of empiricism in the sense of there is a way through your experience that you can perceive truth through the
mm,
senses of self. And I think that's where we are. When I listen to our speech, like, this is what it means for me. This is what I feel like. This is what it is. This is what I feel like I am. Um, Things of that nature, creating our own words, our own definitions. Um,
expanding
you know,
words.
exactly,
Yeah, bro, it's
trying
crazy.
to just expressing self, true self, through our own senses, our own emotion. And I think that's where we are. I think that we're trying to create meaning through how we
Mm,
feel, how we
yeah,
feel.
bro,
And
that's
so
good.
I think that is the foundation of our culture. Now, this is expressed through the arts, through music, through some form of politics and YouTube channels and the communities that we create and the jobs and corporations. I think those things are expressed through those two words I said in the beginning:
Mm,
existentialism and empiricism. I think there is something there, man. I think that we're trying to detect truth and meaning through how we feel. And I think that's a flaw right now in our culture. So I
yeah,
want to
bro, that's
discuss
good.
that.
That's good. Yeah, bro. I mean, it makes me think about like the conversation we had last week and the first conversation we had about worldview when we
Yes.
talked about Sartre and his idea of like, if I am like, if there's a God, then I am not free. Right. And
Yeah.
that is an
Yeah.
incredible philosophical thought to make, right? Like, if freedom is the highest priority,
Mm.
then anything that constrains that freedom is an enemy,
Yeah.
and it makes God the ultimate enemy because he is the
Yep.
ultimate constrainer of freedom. If
Yep.
he exists, right? He's the creator. He has put you in the confines of creation and existence,
Hmm.
and the limitations that you have are there because he put them there. So he
Yep.
is the ultimate constrainer. He is the ultimate enemy, right? And then Sartre says,
Hmm.
well, because I am free, in other words, because I can do stuff, that I want to do per se,
Yep.
that means God doesn't exist, right? And that's the conclusion
Mm-hmm.
he kind of comes to. But like the implications of that working itself out in society, and it's kind of super interesting, you know, because as a mental health practitioner myself,
Mm-hmm.
um, I can see the implications of uh, the therapeutic movement on society in terms of like the
Interesting.
affirmation of that uh, that self, you know, actualization, if you will, the affirmation of like, yeah, you can feel however you want to feel. Yeah, you can
Mm,
believe whatever you want to believe. Yes, like your reality is true, and then like communicating that to everybody. And you know, I wouldn't say that I work in that space because I don't think it has great benefit, but I can
mm-hmm.
also see like the the difficulties that that space has um, impressed on society too, in terms of just making people believe that essentially they're free to think and feel however they want, and then
Yeah.
impress that on the rest of society. So it's not just that I'm having these internal thoughts and feelings, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's that now I get to impress those internal thoughts and feelings on everybody else's reality because my reality is the true reality, right?
Mm,
And so
yeah.
like
Yeah.
we almost have this like clash going on between people in the context of culture, which is like whose reality is the ultimate reality. And then to
Mm,
some degree it becomes a race to the bottom, right? Because you know, when
mm,
we talk about things that have shaped our culture, one of them is like this idea of power, right? And like who has
yes.
power and who has influence. And
Yeah.
so now we've kind of flipped that on its head and we've said, well, whoever has the least power actually has the most power, right? So now
Mm-hmm.
it's a race to the bottom in terms of who's more oppressed or
Yeah.
who has more challenges or who has more difficulty. Those are the
Yeah.
people that their experience has to be listened to. And I'm not saying there isn't even value in that, but what I'm
Absolutely.
saying is,
Yeah.
can we make that the objective standard by which we determine what is right, what is true, in
Mm,
how we shape our culture, right? Like, does
yeah.
that, and like, I don't think people
It's good.
ask these types of questions.
It's
Like,
good.
I think we just like, we villainize stuff so quickly because, you know,
Mm-hmm.
it pushes back against the way that we are living, right? So something
Yeah.
comes up that's contrary to our belief system or contrary to our value system, and because it's contrary, it offends us or it scares us, right? It makes us
Mm,
afraid. And so we respond by saying it's wrong instead of evaluating whether it's actually true or not. And if it has any implications for the value system or belief system we currently like
mm,
hold, right?
mm. Yeah.
And I would say, like, once again, as a Christian, like Jesus is the logos, right? Like
Yeah.
in the beginning, right, there was God, and
Mm-hmm.
like the word was God with God, and the word became flesh, right, and dwelt among us. So
Mm-hmm.
like if Jesus, if all things are created through him, for him, by him, then I shouldn't be afraid of truth because anything that is true ultimately belongs to God, right? And
Yeah.
so I should be able to
Yeah.
explore
Yeah.
anything that comes about, right? I
Yeah.
should be able to explore it and like learn from it and grow from it and determine whether it's true or not, and if it has any implications on the way I'm living, and ultimately if it has any implications on the way I'm living out my faith. I
Yeah.
shouldn't have to be afraid of truth.
Yeah.
And
That
so
see.
like, yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Go ahead,
I,
bro. Go ahead.
let me come in there for a little bit. I think that what's interesting about that is that it's true. Like we should not be afraid of truth, but
Nope.
we are. We are afraid of truth, right? I think we have to acknowledge the fact that I truly believe this. We have to acknowledge the fact that we don't want truth. We don't want it.
Mm,
I think we don't want it because Scripture talks about how light comes into the world, but how we love darkness too much.
mm,
We enjoy the dark. We enjoy sin. The light, truth is right. It's. I'm not trying to get into the. I'm not trying to get to to this long discussion of what is truth, right? Because I mean,
yeah, we'll
Jesus,
save that for another podcast, bro. We'll save
facts,
that for
facts,
another one.
big facts. But I think one thing truth does do very well is shine light on things, and I think that is something that we are afraid of. And I
Mm,
think because of our nature that is fallen, because of a nature that has been corrupted by sin and separated from our Creator, that has created this this way of living in the sense of, well, I'm just going to dwell in the dark, and when light
mm,
comes, I'm gonna run away from it.
yeah.
I don't think we want truth. Truth hurts, dude. It hurts,
Yeah,
dog, and
and
it's
the reason it hurts is because what I was saying before, it causes you to have to change. You're faced with this like decision of like, I've got to like shift the way I think about the world. And that's hard, bro. Like
Yeah.
to like believe like this is true for decades, you know what I'm saying? And then
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden recognize that it's not. And then like, yo, what implications does this have for my life and the way that I'm living it? Like there's some drastic things that may need to change as a
Mm-hmm.
consequence of you now coming to like this understanding of like what is true. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And what is more true than what you believed previously.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think like the easier thing to do, which comes back to the culture conversation, is just to like determine what truth is based on how you feel. You get what
Yeah.
I'm saying? That's just
Mm-hmm.
easier. It's just way
Yeah.
easier than like
Mm-hmm.
facing the realities of like, yo, what I may feel might not actually be fully true. Like it might,
Mm-hmm.
there's truth involved, right? Because it is what I
Mm-hmm.
feel. And like there's a, a validity to that. Like you can't escape feelings. And they're
Yeah.
powerful, bro. Like
They
they
are.
do, like they can take over, you know what I'm saying? Like somebody's
Mm-hmm.
mind, somebody's thoughts, somebody's like
Mm-hmm.
worldview even, right?
Yep.
But like to step back from those thoughts and to evaluate them for what they are, which by the way, I think is part of us being made in the image of God.
Yeah.
Shout out to C.L. Mitchell. I heard him say this, like our ability to think about thought, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is profound. Our ability to step back and conceptualize what we're thinking about is like something is an image bearing quality.
Yeah.
Um, we can actually like reflect and determine whether what we're thinking is fully true or true at all. But
Yeah.
that's a really hard skill to do, especially when you're stuck in the middle of how you feel, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yep.
I think once again, like this is such an important conversation because this is where young people are. This is how they think. This is how they perceive reality.
Yeah.
And then like they take those feelings and then they translate them in conversation as if they are
Yeah.
universal truth, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think that's had massive implications for how our culture is being shaped and then the
Yeah.
things that like we're okay with in our society, the things that we sign off on,
Yeah.
and like the things that are now not okay to say that were okay to say, you know,
Mm-hmm.
10
Yeah.
years ago, 15 years ago. Like
Yeah.
it's been such a radical shift in culture, right? And
Yeah.
so I think we have to understand where that's come from, but then also um, like know how to respond to that and then understand or interpret what you're hearing from young people
Mm-hmm.
as a consequence of um, how they understand the world and how culture has shaped them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the biggest problems in what's shaping our culture, because we want to increase this idea of expression of self and what is true for you and what is my truth and things of that nature. I think it I think it's putting us in a pot in a sense of not being held accountable for
Mm,
anything. And
mm,
so what do I mean? I mean that we have to answer to somebody. I
yeah.
think this is the reality of our life, is that
Yep.
we have to answer to somebody. And I think this is a system, like a metaphysical system in a sense. So follow me here, is like a child can't do whatever they want because they got to answer to somebody. You can't drive down the street and do whatever you drive however you want because you got to answer to somebody. You can't do whatever you want at your job because you got to answer to somebody.
Absolutely.
And I think,
Absolutely.
and also, I mean, overarching, if you, when you die, you have to answer to somebody. And so
Mm.
what I'm saying is that I think man's attempt to be free is to escape accountability. And I think that is what we're trying to do. You know,
Yes, bro.
we're trying to pursue freedom, and in the midst of that, we're trying to not be held accountable by the decisions that we make and the truth that we think that is true based off how we feel. I don't think that's how that works. Now
Yep.
I do believe in freedom though, but not in the freedom that the world explains it. I believe
Mm-hmm.
in freedom in the sense of what the scripture says. In Christ I am free,
Mm-hmm.
right? By the washing of his blood and his forgiveness I am free. So I think the freedom that we're looking for is the freedom that Christ offers. but I think you can't find it in the world. You can only find it in Christ. You
Yeah, bro.
understand what I'm saying?
I
And
do.
so I think that that idea is seeping into our culture, and we seeing people running rampant. They're doing whatever they want. You know, you can't tell me what to do. You don't know my life. You don't know what I've been through. Like we're just saying all these things, and it's like, well, we have to say no to something here. What can we
Mm,
say no to? You know, it's you really have to question, if I can't say no to nothing, where are we going to end up yet 20 years from now?
mm,
You know, where are we going to end up at? You know, I'm afraid to picture a world where we can't say no to things. You understand
mm.
what I'm saying? And so it's like,
Yeah, it's almost not culturally acceptable to say no to stuff, right? Or to like say that something's wrong, right? You
mm,
can't do that.
mm-hmm,
Like, we were watching that podcast last night and it's like, you
yep,
know, you can't say somebody's overweight. You can't say somebody isn't
yeah,
attractive to you. You can't say,
yep,
um, yeah, there's just all types of things that you can't say, like it's shaming, it's demeaning.
mm-hmm,
Um, but then if somebody else says it, as long as they're like seen as the person who has less power, it's appropriate.
mm-hmm,
It's like
yep,
super interested in the context of our culture, right? And I'm
mm-hmm,
not saying there isn't this element, because there is in the gospel of speaking truth to power, right? Like Jesus did that. So I'm not
mm-hmm,
saying there isn't that, but like I don't think this is what that is. It's something else. It's a little bit, it's distorted. It's it's what's the word I'm looking for? It's been manipulated. It's just like it's not right. There's something insidious about it. That's
mm,
what it feels like to me. But I want to
yeah,
come back to what you were saying earlier, because you were talking about like your child can't do whatever they want. It's like, bro, like I
right.
have 3 kids. When my
Yeah,
bro,
yeah,
when my
yes,
kids, and bro,
yes,
you already know, when my
yes.
kids like were growing
Oh
up, like
God.
first of all, my youngest is 2, and I'm still trying to get this dude not to essentially kill himself. Like
Yeah.
we got, bro, he's like always doing stuff. It's like, bro, are you trying to go see Jesus? Like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? Like
Bro, that's a
he
fact, bro. This
trying to
dude.
trying to like put stuff in the in the
Oh
plugs,
God.
trying to like bro, I don't know what it
Jesus.
is, but like kids will always find the worst possible object they can find in your house.
Yes.
Like I remember
Absolutely.
when me and Katie first got married, and like we were living in Oklahoma at the time, and like
Mm-hmm.
Isaiah found a pair of scissors out of nowhere. I'd never even seen this pair of scissors before. I'm
What?
like,
He
bro,
said, I never even
where did it
seen
come
that.
from? And it's like, bro,
Yeah.
there's all these toys, there's all these possessions, there's all these things that he has, but he
Mm-hmm.
finds the one thing that can do him the most harm. You see
Yeah,
what
I
I'm saying? And so like,
know.
bro,
That's
and
good.
so what I'm saying is like you
Yes,
spend the
he
first
said.
couple of years like
Yes.
essentially trying to prevent your kid from harming themselves. Do you know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? And
Yes.
so it's like yeah, you can't do the things that you want to
Yeah.
do all the time. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Because
Yes.
like sometimes the things that you want to do will like result in you seriously harming yourself,
Yes.
seriously harming somebody else, or like
Mm-hmm.
multiple people being harmed, right? And so
Facts.
like there are like plenty of times in the context of our lives where there are people around us, because they care for us,
Yeah.
they prevent us from doing things that are going to cause us harm.
Yeah.
But now we live in a society where like we validate people all the way to them doing things that
That's
actually cause
good.
themselves long-term harm
That's
and
good.
damage. Do you get what
That's
I'm saying?
good. Yes,
Because
sir.
like we feel like we can't pass judgment. Like I
Yeah.
remember us having a conversation on a high school campus, and it was like we were talking about like we were talking about teenagers struggling with suicidal ideation, right? It was like
Mm-hmm.
hey, if your friend is talking about completing suicide, like what are you going to do about it? And
Yeah.
some of them were like they wouldn't tell their parents, like their
Mm.
friends' parents, because they were afraid of the implications of telling their friends' parents. And so I'm like,
Yeah.
so you're going to
Mm-hmm.
let your friend like complete suicide?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
That's tough.
Or like, hey,
Yes.
my friend uses substances and is
Mm-hmm.
going down a bad path, but I'm not going to
Yep.
say anything. And it's like,
Yep.
why? Well, I don't feel like I can pass judgment. And it's like,
Mm.
well, is that what you're doing? Or are you like actually helping this person like
Yeah.
change something that
Mm.
like is gonna result in a healthier life and a better quality life? Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so
Mm-hmm.
like because we now have this standard that like is like what we're talking about, this empiricism almost,
Yeah.
or like is this empiricism now
Mm-hmm.
like things that like we
Yeah.
actually know are harming people, we're like just
Mm.
not saying anything about because we feel like we can't say anything about them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, where does that come from?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Come on, man.
That's
Fact.
so strange, bro, to me.
Yeah.
And so,
No.
anyways, Chris, to move on to our next question, because I feel like we've been going all over the place on this one.
Oh yeah. I mean,
Um,
it's yeah. It's a
I mean,
lot to talk
we
about,
could
man.
stay here we could stay here for the rest of the podcast. Just to be honest, we really could.
Facts. Big facts.
But when it comes to culture, like, what do you think um, are the like major things that we're seeing in Gen Z that are like markers of their culture?
Mm.
Like, what would you point to?
Markers of their culture. Um, One thing I will point to is how social media has profoundly shifted the way they think. I will point to social media, and I
Mhm.
think that because this is like the generation that was born with a phone, and most likely going to die with a phone. I think we're about to see
Mm,
something shift. Uh, and I think something as powerful as the phone, I think that in itself is going to change how people are friends. I think it's going to change how the family structure is. I think like for instance, so the simple fact that people don't take people's words anymore in the sense of this is what this means, they
mm.
can quickly run to Google and find the stats. You
Yeah,
understand what
bro,
I'm saying? They can
I
quickly
do.
run to Google and find the stats and really find the information that they need. But the problem is that there's too much information on that they need. I
Yep.
think Gen Z is loaded with facts, and I don't think they know which one is valuable and which one is the most valuable. And so I think that
Absolutely.
and so they're led to the idea of what I'm gonna land on, what it means for me. And I think that is a stamp
Mm,
for Gen Z. I think the stamp for Gen Z is what is their truth, what things mean for them. And I think that is one of the things in their culture because you're correct that they don't want to judge each other or they just want to let each other live their own lives and do whatever they want to do. I
yep.
think that is something that is stamped in their culture in the sense of live your own life, how on
Live
your
your
own
truth.
terms,
Do
yep,
you,
on your truth. Exactly. And I think that is the marker of Gen Z right there, is to live your own truth.
bro? You made me think about this, and I think it's so important. Like,
Mm.
if you heard of the concept of rhetoric of data, shout out to my boy John. He would always
No.
talk about this.
Mm-mm.
John,
Explain
the
that.
originator, founder of Real Talk. So he was, because he's a poli sci major. We'd always talk about this. He talked about the rhetoric of data, and basically the idea that like it's not just the data that's presented, but it's how you interpret the data that matters, right?
Mm.
And so you talked about Gen Z having access to all this information, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they have access to all this data, but it's not just the raw data that matters, it's how they're interpreting it, right? And they're
Mm.
choosing to interpret that data based upon how they feel. And so that
Mm.
has massive implications for how they understand the data and then communicate that data to other people. Do you get what I'm saying?
Mm. Yep.
They're
Yep.
not interpreting the data by some empirical standard that we have, right? They're just interpreting it based on their worldview, which what we talked about in
Mm.
episode 1. Go watch that if you haven't watched it already, because it was dope.
Facts.
Um,
Yep.
it'll help you understand what we're talking about even now. So
Yep.
they're interpreting it based on their worldview, which comes back to like, yo, it's really important that we like help them establish a uh, solid worldview. And ultimately, when I
Mm-hmm.
mean solid, I mean a worldview from the Christian perspective, because I think it makes the most sense of reality. I don't
Yep.
think Christianity is just like, oh, Jesus comes to save you of your sin and you get to go to this place called heaven and you hang out
Yeah.
at the church and you hide from the world and you don't
Yeah.
sin until you die and then
Yeah.
yay. No, I actually believe that Christ has come to reconcile the world to himself, and he does that through changing men and women's hearts. And those
Yeah.
men and women then bow the knee to Jesus,
Yeah.
profess him as Lord, and go on to
Mm.
serve him and
Mm-hmm.
love others in this world and to lay their lives down. We were the people that went into London when the bubonic plague was going on as everybody else was running out. We died with the
Mm-hmm.
sick. We were the people who took babies off of
Yeah.
the walls of the Roman Empire because they'd been left to die by exposure or to be eaten by wolves. We were the people who
Yeah.
took care of our own poor and everybody else's. We were the people who built universities and orphanages.
Come on, man.
Christianity has had profound implications on
Come on.
the world and ultimately on the West. And there are
Mm-hmm.
plenty of non Christian people, scientists, historians, philosophers who will like admit that that is true.
Yeah.
And even while not believing that Jesus is the Christ, that he is the Messiah, that he is God, they will say, like, you cannot say that Christianity has not had profound implications on what it
Yeah.
means to exist
Yeah.
in like civilization, in the
Hmm.
world, period. Right. So
Yep.
you just have to acknowledge that off rip. Do you get what I'm
Hmm.
saying?
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is like, there's a
Boy, that boy went
culture
off. He went
there's
off.
a culture that's been like created by something like other than that, right? And that's what we're talking about. And
Hmm.
so like you're saying, like, this, do your own thing, and it's how they interpret like information. And
Yeah.
so like we have to give them a different framework. Like influences, we have to give young people a different framework to interpret information. And
Yeah.
ultimately, I think the way that we do that is we start with wisdom. And the reason we start with wisdom is because we can give them practical experience and stories, narrative, which they're into, because they're into social, right? Stories,
Hmm.
like short stories. We can give them stories from our lives of how we've experienced the problem that they're trying to solve, and
Hmm.
like how we've had positive experiences and negative experiences, and they can
Hmm.
take that information and process it and then make a decision. But what that
Hmm.
does is it builds trust, right? Because
Yeah.
we're giving them wisdom. Because what the data can't give them is wisdom. It can give them data, right? And they have to
Hmm.
interpret it. But they need some wisdom to help them interpret the data.
Yeah.
And so then that what that does is gives us some cachet, gives us some equity with them. So now when they ask us like, yo, how did you come to those conclusions? Like, why did you interpret the situation that way? Like, how, where did you get this wisdom from? We can start to
Hmm.
point them to like, hey, this is why, this is what we believe, and
Hmm.
this is how this shapes our interpretation of like how we go about living our lives and how we go about interpreting the things around us. Do you get what I'm saying?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I do. I think, man, dog, dog, there's so much to say because I understand the I understand the desire to be free. It's
Mm,
like I get it, dog, because it's, man, it feels like you're trapped, and like your mind is loud, the universe is yelling at you. You feel like you can't escape this certain addiction. You know, Sometimes you feel alone, and it's like, man, do I just want to be? I want to experience some type of liberation, some type of freedom.
mm,
And you know what I'm saying? And so, like, I think freedom exists, and
mm,
but I think it exists in the sense of what Christ done on the cross. And so, like, and I want to talk this through with you. And the reason why I want to talk about freedom, because I think this is the foundation for Gen Z's culture, is the idea
mm.
of freedom of expressing
Yeah,
who
it's where
I think
everything else
I
is coming
am.
from.
Exactly. And so it's like a board game, right? And if you don't know the rules to the board game, it's not like it's not like you can't play. To a degree, you can play. You're just gonna ruin the whole game, though. You know what
Yeah,
I'm
or just do
saying?
whatever you want
You're
and
gonna do
determine
whatever
how
you
you
want.
win.
Yeah, exactly. And then you you could tell yourself you're winning. No, you can tell yourself that they can't tell me what to do. I'm just gonna do whatever I want. But if you don't know the rules to the game, you can't properly play. And I think
Hmm.
that's the same thing with life, right? It's like I think Christ tells us how to properly play. I think he tells us the rules
Mm,
to life in a sense of sin, righteousness, goodness, holiness. He tells us the true nature of things. Go back to truth. Truth shines light on things. I think the gospel shines light on the fact that we were separated from God. Facts. And Jesus came down, lived the entire life that we could not live, fulfilled the law perfectly, then died on the cross, rose, and now he has given us something that nobody else can give us. And like, now I can live in a nature that was actually made for me. You know what I'm saying? Like,
that's good.
from the beginning, God made me into something that I don't even know He made me into something that I don't know how to do without Him. That's my point. It's like
Mm, that's good.
I can't live this life outside of Christ, outside of His light, outside of His truth. I can't, because I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to properly love somebody. I don't know how to properly be in a relationship with a woman or with my boys. I don't know how to properly manage money or anything of these natures. There has to be a certain truth
Mm,
that Christ provides that benefits me in a way that allows me to be free in the sense of my nature.
that's
You
good, bro.
understand what I'm saying? Not
Yes.
just in my ideal, in my thoughts, in my mind, in the realm of mystery. I can just come up with whatever I want to come up with, because and at the end, I even need aid in my own rational thought, because I
Mm,
can make anything relate to anything and it can make sense to
yes.
me when
Yes,
it's
you
not
can.
true. Right?
Yes, you
Like
can.
like Proverbs says, a man does what he think is right, but it leads to death. It's pointing
Mm,
out the fact that our ability to rationalize is off. We can't
facts.
we cannot rationalize properly. You
Yes,
understand
bro.
what I'm
And you
saying?
said
And
you just said something profound too, because it points. Sorry to interject. It points to the reality that the Proverbs is a profound place for Gen Z to start reading the
yes,
text. Right?
yep,
Like, think about what you just said. Like, that would stop a bunch of Gen Zers in their tracks. I've read
yes,
Proverbs to those
yeah,
guys before, and they're like, "Ooh, where did that come
Jesus,
from? Ooh,
yes,
I know exactly what that means." Or like that
yep,
idea that like you can plan your way and still be wrong.
yeah,
Like when you say stuff like that,
yes,
like you step back from that and you're like, "That's hella
facts,
true, bro." Like,
facts,
and why
facts,
is that, right? And like that's
yep,
what we never stop to do. We never stop to think and reflect on like
mm,
why things like that are actually true, right?
yes,
And so, like, I think for us as influencers, as parents, pastors, teachers, coaches, our job is to like we were talking about earlier, step back from the feeling, step back from the thoughts,
yeah,
and like do what we can do as image bearers and reflect on them. Well, is that actually true, and why is
mm,
it true, and what
yeah,
implications does that have for society, right? And I think
mm-hmm,
that's another thing that we struggle to do. We struggle to think about the implications of what it is we say is true. Like, okay, if this is true, what does that mean for society? What
mm,
does that mean for like how I'm going to live? What does that mean for how I'm going to interact with other people?
yeah,
And does that bring
yes,
about growth and health and flourishing for others, including myself, or does it not?
mm-hmm,
Like, I think that's a
mm-hmm,
valuable question to ask, right?
facts,
And to answer. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
mm-hmm, I
Anyways,
do.
keep going, bro.
No,
Sorry,
no,
I had to interject.
no, man, I think that's good, bro, because I think that leads to the next question, which we're gonna have to really dive into, is church culture.
Uh
Okay,
oh.
we got to dive into church
Uh
culture
oh.
because throughout this conversation, we've been talking about Gen Z's culture and how they perceive truth through how they feel and what social media has done, and so there is another city, okay, an
Mm.
invisible city, but there's a city
Mm-hmm.
and it's established, right,
Mm-hmm.
by its own governor, its own president, and it has directed us to be a certain way. And
Mm-hmm.
so, what do you think? How should church culture respond to the world? What do you think about that? We'll start with that question.
That's a
We'll go
big
from
question,
there.
bro.
It is.
But I'm
But we
gonna
gotta
answer that.
discuss it though, man. We have to
I'm
talk
gonna I'm
about
gonna
it.
answer it, but I want to add something to your previous question. I think
Okay.
that, but to the previous thing we were talking about Gen Z culture, I
Mm.
think something we could add to that is justice. Like, that's a massive part of
Yes.
their culture. Like,
Yeah.
justice, and like I'm still thinking about what that actually means for Gen Z.
Yeah.
But basically, this idea, right, of like things being equitable,
Mm.
things being fair. Like, even though I don't think fairness exists, yeah, I said
Yeah.
that I don't think fairness exists,
Yeah.
and like yeah, so justice, equitable opportunities, or opportunity. What is it? You got opportunity. You've got opportunity of outcome,
Yeah, yeah. Opportunity outcome. Yeah, yeah.
and then you've got the other
Mm.
one, which I'm like blanking on right now. Um, but like you've got, so like they believe like everything should be fair and just and right in the
Mm-hmm.
context of society, and like anywhere where it appears as though things are not fair and just and right, then
Mm.
you know
Yeah.
that's not right. And
Yeah.
like I get it, like to some degree, right? But then I think we have to answer the questions, like in a society where people are fallen and things are not going right, like how much unjustness, because we're not going to get rid of unjustness fully, because the reality is unjustness is intrinsic to all of us. We all
Mm-hmm.
do things that are not right. We
Yeah.
all have we all lie, cheat, steal,
Absolutely.
We take advantage of other people and different
Absolutely.
things of that nature. And we do it for like
Hmm.
multiple different reasons, right? But the reality is
Hmm.
because those things exist in the context of our society, there's always going to be a level of unjustness. Now, I'm not
Hmm.
saying we shouldn't combat against it. And I'm not saying like we shouldn't push back against like gross injustices that we see in our society that are evident, like, sex trafficking and,
Yeah.
people at like living in poverty, if we can solve those problems, and
Yes.
people being put in positions where they're being unfairly incarcerated and whatever else, all those different types of things that are actually happening in the
Mm.
context of our society. I think we should actively combat those things and challenge those things, and do something about them, right?
Yeah.
And I think like ultimately, like Christians have been at the forefront of most of those battles throughout
Mm.
like human history. So like we can
Yeah.
have that conversation too. But like that is what it is. Like
Yeah.
the concept of justice like doesn't even make sense outside of there being a creator that like is going to judge justly. Like if there isn't that, then justice doesn't exist. There's no reason for it whatsoever, because
Yeah.
everything is purely relative and social, and it's just who has the most power, because
Yeah.
whoever has the most power gets to dictate the rules, right?
Yeah.
And so I think justice is a massive thing for them. I think for them, a massive thing is like relationship, which is like even strange too, because the way that they relate to one another has like drastically changed, right? In
Mm.
terms of like the inability to like really have deep, meaningful conversations in person, but then like have most of their communications happen through technology,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
that
That's
being
true.
how they relate to one another. That's that being how they like first get to
Mm.
know one another before they date, or like
Yeah.
never actually meet in the person that you're in a relationship with, and them living on the other side of the planet or whatever.
Hmm.
And once again, like I'm not here to say like these things are like all bad, right? I think there are um difficult implications and positive implications for like the things that make their culture. And I think what we have to
Mm.
be able to do is like step back and help them reflect on how they see the world and what implications that has for their culture, and like whether those things are things that they should live out or not, right? And so
Hmm.
those are, I think those are two things right now I would point to: their relationships and then how they think about justice as
Hmm.
important things that shape their culture as well. And you see those things throughout their art, you see those things throughout the music, you see those things throughout like the way that they interact with each other on social media,
Yes.
and so on and so forth. I think another thing is morbidity in terms of
Mm.
how they view death and how they
Yeah.
make fun of it,
Yeah.
and how they make jokes about stuff that we would never make jokes about:
Yeah.
suicide, people being killed,
Hmm.
mass shootings, all those different types of
Hmm.
things. But I think part of that is the reality that they have seen a lot of that because
Mm.
of like social media and because of the things that have happened like recently, right? Like I mean, there's been several mass shootings this year, you know what I mean? And for
Hmm.
them it's terrifying because they're going to schools and it's like, yo, am I going to go to school and get shot up today?
Yeah.
And once again,
Yeah.
that's the reality of what some of these young people are feeling. And so
Mm.
like we have to take that into consideration when we think about them and their culture and how they view the world. And I think some of those
Mm.
things are like shaping how they're like in they're thinking about their life. And like,
Mm.
for a lot of Gen Zers, life to them seems pretty meaningless. You know what I'm saying? Seems
Yeah.
pretty trivial. And I think once again that comes into the idea that like God is completely out the picture. It's all about freedom, and me being whatever I want to be, but I have no clue what I want to be because I'm a teenager,
Yeah.
and you know, I'm barely figuring out who I am.
Mm.
And now there's like 35 genders for me to pick from. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
like, and not just genders, but I can pick from all these other things as well. Like, I don't even know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
so, um,
I
it
do.
just seems to be an incredibly confusing world for them to live in.
Mm.
But to transition to your question about church culture, I think this is an interesting one because um, I think like Christianity is supposed to have this culture that transcends like the culture that we live in the world, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
And so like, because the cultures that Christians exist in are different. Like, in the East, it's very different. Like in, Asia, in
Hmm.
Africa, right? Like it's a completely different culture altogether. And
Hmm.
there's completely different implications for how you live out the faith. But I think like generally speaking, I think Christians are supposed to live in a way that displays what it looks like to live under the rule and reign of Jesus wherever they're at. And so I
Mm,
think there are things in your culture that'll be like evidently not good. And I think you can live in a way to resist those things
mm,
that will demonstrate to the people around you there's something different around, about you, right?
yeah.
And so I think like our culture moves incredibly fast, and we live at like an incredibly quick pace, and we're incredibly anxious and depressed and those different types of things because
Mm-hmm.
of like how connected we are to technology and the implications that's having on our mental health, and like how we're interacting in the context of relationships, like how much fear we have and different things of that nature. And so I think as like Christians, those are some of the things that we can resist
Mm,
and live in relationship to in a different way, that I think if we do, it'll demonstrate to people around us like, yo, there's something different about these guys. I think a
mm,
lot of times too, people who like people who don't necessarily have like, they have a belief system, but the belief system is that God doesn't exist, right?
mm-hmm.
They like will say that there are things wrong with the world,
Mm-hmm.
but they actually don't go out and do anything about it. So like
Yeah.
they'll talk about how poverty is an issue and how
Yeah.
suffering is an issue
Yeah.
and all these different types of things, but it's like, okay, what are you doing to solve the issue?
Mm-hmm.
You're not doing anything.
Yeah.
They're just talking about it, right? And
Yeah.
so what we find with Christians is I think we're supposed to like recognize those things in our culture and then actually go do something about them, right?
Yeah.
However big or small that is. I think once again, that is like something that will demonstrate like, yo, there's something different about this person. They're not just talking about it, they're about it.
Yeah.
And then it begs the question, like, why are you doing this? You know what I'm saying? Why are you
Mm-hmm.
out here serving single moms? Why are you out here um, helping this girl who was going to abort her baby raise her child?
Mm-hmm.
Why are you adopting kids out of the foster care system? Why are
Yeah.
you trying to help homeless people get off the street? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what are you, why are you doing this stuff? Well,
Yeah.
because I believe that one day there's going to be a kingdom where, all this stuff is going to be done away with. And like, we all get to be a part of it if we want to be.
Mm.
And the reason for that is like Jesus has come to reconcile us to God and
Yeah.
to do away with this thing that is ruining our world called sin.
Mm.
Um, and so I think that when I think about church culture, I think that's how it's supposed to be different from the world. I don't think it's so much like we make sure that we're not doing the things that the world is doing, although I think there is a level of truth to that. But I
Mm-hmm.
think it's more so that we live in a way that demonstrates that the kingdom of God is about challenging and solving and restoring like our world, right? And that means I
Yeah.
think we have to attack the issues in our culture that are actually harming people. And
Yeah.
if we do that, I think it makes us look different.
Mm.
And I think also like Gen Z to some degree wants to do stuff. They want to be about stuff. They want to be a part
Mm-hmm.
of something bigger than themselves. But what
Absolutely.
we're not doing is demonstrating that Christianity actually can be that and actually is that. And that's what it actually means to be a Christian. And I think if we can do that, it's going to have profound implications on like how they embody justice and how they go about challenging the things in our world that need to be challenged, and how they go about like redeeming structures and
Mm.
rebuilding things.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think I don't think Christianity is explained well. I don't think
Facts.
I don't think we really take a step back and really observe the Christian faith,
Mm,
because it's like, man, when you read people like Augustine, or when you read dudes like C.S. Lewis, or Thomas Aquinas, or or even the early church fathers, right? Like, they explain Christianity in a way that is captivating, you know, and they dive deep into thought, you know, they dive deep
mm,
into the trenches of life, the hardships of life,
mm-hmm,
and or was it like this idea of justice, you know? God calls us to do right by people, you know? He calls us to submit to the authorities of the world because God has established them, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he also says, hey, at the end, I will judge. I will put things in the right perspective. I will make all things right at the end, right?
Yep.
And
Amen.
so this desire to make things right now,
Mm.
it's a trap to a degree because
Mm.
it's not going to be right now, you know? We're not
Mm.
we Because what does it mean to make something straight? Even Solomon talked about you cannot make straight what has been made crooked, you know? And so
Oof.
like how do you because if you want to make something right, and I'm not saying let's not fight for justice. I'm not saying let's not speak up for those who can't speak for themselves. I'm not saying that. The church needs we are called, like it or not, we are called to be in the trenches. It,
Mm-hmm.
it is what it is, bro. We are called
Facts.
to be
It
a
is what it
light.
is.
We're called to be a light in the world. So what does that mean? That
Yep.
means we got to be out there, bro. We got to be out
Mm-hmm.
there and not be out there and judge. Now, I like the one of the reasons why the world don't like the church because the church judges. And it's like, why don't judge them? You was once there where they were. Then Christ saved you. You should be the most understanding of their world and their thought processes.
Mm.
Like, right? It's like, man, I don't judge, bro. I get it. Life is hard, dog. And you want to do whatever you want to do. I get it. You don't want truth. I understand. But man, here's the love of Christ. And let me show you the love of Christ, you know? And so, anyways, I go off that because it's
Yeah.
something I appeal to, man.
And I
I
think
just don't
too,
I don't
like,
yeah.
to further clarify what you're saying, because I think it's important when you say judge, like I think there'll be
Mm,
people who hear like, oh
yes.
well,
Okay.
you
Yeah.
can't tell people about, judgment and
Yeah.
hell and those different types of things. I don't think that's what we're saying. I think
Right.
what we're saying is like we have a propensity to to like rock up to people who are doing things that we consider like real like grotesque or
Yeah.
disgusting or whatever else, or like maybe even the text would say that God considers those things to
Yeah.
be that, right?
Yeah.
And then like we want to heap that on people,
Yeah.
and like you can't be around me, you can't come here, you can't be a part of this
Yeah.
because like this is happening in your life. And it's like, well, like if somebody's not in Christ, what do you expect them to do other than
Right.
what it is that they're doing? They're going to like sin. That's what they do.
Yeah.
You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? And
Yes.
so like why be like upset about that?
Yeah.
That's what they're going to do.
Yeah.
That's what you did before
Yeah.
you were in Christ.
Yeah.
And so like can we have a slightly different perspective and understand that we're not different but for the grace of God. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. No,
And so
thanks
we
for
needed
clarifying
Christ to
that. Yeah.
transform we needed Christ to transform us by grace, right? And they
Yes.
need the same thing. And so what we have to do is go out and communicate that grace
Yeah.
and love. You know what I'm
Yes.
saying? And like Paul said, judge those inside the church. God will judge those outside. Do you get what I'm
Yep.
saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like our job is
Yep.
to hold the brothers and sisters accountable. And what we should be
Yep.
holding each other accountable to is living out the gospel, embodying the gospel in our
Yeah.
world,
Mm.
and like communicating that to each other. And if there's a brother or sister that's in danger of like doing something that like they shouldn't be doing, then let them know, right?
Yeah.
And like pray that the spirit works in their heart and in their mind, because that's
Yeah.
what you need to happen. Because bro, we've been in the game for a little bit now. Like people are gonna do what they're gonna do, bro.
Yeah. It's true.
Like just
Yeah.
keeping it a stack, they're going to
I
do
don't
what they're
judge,
going to
man.
do, bro.
Yeah.
And so like, but what I found is consistently loving people, being there for them, challenging them
That's it,
when
man.
the time comes, but then also like showing this like unwavering commitment to them, bar them doing something absolutely insane, right?
Mm.
um is extremely transformative for people.
Yeah.
And so like I think we need to have a culture as a church of love, you know what I'm saying? And I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that means like just blind acceptance of things that people are doing,
Mm.
but like it means like loving people in spite of the things that they're doing, right?
Yes.
And when the opportunity presents itself to speak the truth, we take it. You know what I
Yep.
mean?
Yep.
Um,
I
And
agree
then, like, when the moment isn't right, we don't take it. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Hmm.
And so yeah, man. And like we could get into an even more nuanced conversation about that, but I think I'll leave that there for right now.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, bro, episode 3,
Episode
locked
3.
in, loaded,
I
in
want
the
to say,
books.
I want to say to be continued because
Yeah,
I,
bro, this conversation is not finished. Nope.
it's not finished, man. Because yeah, there's so much more to say about culture, and
100%.
because it's more, it's a system, man. It's a belief
Yep.
system, and it defines everything. But you're right. To be
Yeah, it's
continued,
like
man.
it's almost
Talk
like the
about
legs, the hands and the feet
yeah,
to worldview. You know what I'm saying? It's
yeah,
like the hands and the feet of worldview almost. It's
yeah.
like how worldview works itself out in the practical.
Yeah,
Probably need to talk about that some. But
no
hopefully
doubt,
for
man.
those of you that listen, man, like, this is gonna spur on conversation for you to have with your friends, to have with your
Hmm.
spouse, to have with your children, to have in your youth group, to have with your sports team, whatever, man.
Yeah,
We hope this was beneficial to you. You can always reach out to us, questions, comments, concerns, leave a comment on social, leave a
yeah,
comment on YouTube. Um, you
yeah,
know,
man.
the Real Talk podcast now is officially under Reframe Youth, which is our youth
Mhm.
ministry curriculum company. We create content and resources. We're trying to rethink youth culture and help churches and organizations rethink youth culture. So check that out, reframeyouth.com. We love you guys, and we will talk to you soon. Peace.
Also,
Okay.
I also want to say, man, like this video, subscribe to our channel, man.
Heck yeah. We got to get to a
Share
thousand
this
subs ASAP.
ASAP, man. We're trying to hop in this space, man. We're trying to get some
Yeah, we're trying to make
conversations
moves.
going. We're trying to challenge some people. And so, man, like, subscribe, leave a comment down below, man. Share this video,
Absolutely.
and we'll see y'all soon.
Yeah, we'll see you guys soon. Peace.
Peace.